G'day guys, welcome to my RXY's Future video. Today I'm going to be talking to you guys about NRL Round 7 recap preview for 2020 guys, so let's get started. So the first match of that game, we see the Panthers going up against the Rabbitohs. Now, this game was an average game, which I can see the Panthers are improving pretty much really well. But last time the Rabbitohs were really a good team. They were really consecutive, but sometimes though they just lose a match because how the way they play, and it's just how the way they got their squads in form, in shape, and obviously with their injuries. And plus, even though if they're coming back from injuries, I reckon that they will struggle playing football anyway. But it was obviously an average game of football. Thursday night this one was, and I just think this game was really average and consecutive match to think that it was an absolute great game anyway. But it was 20 points to 12 scoreline, which means that 3 tries were conceded and plus a penalty goal, which that means Nathan Cleary obviously kicked the penalty goal to make it 20 points to 12. And plus, I did go for the Panthers by 4 points, and they obviously won by that match. But let's have a look at the Panthers tries. So what we have here is Brett Naden, Stephen Crichton, Dylan Edwards, and Nathan Cleary. Nathan Cleary played really well. Outstanding for him. So was Dylan Edwards, playing a really good match. Brett Naden is just having a flyer. Every time he gets the ball, he just really tries hard to obviously score a try anyway, and he obviously does. But Stephen Crichton's obviously a really development player, which I think he is a really good player. But so is others too. Let's have a look at the Rabbitohs tries. So they only scored 2 tries, which I can think that these 2 players obviously scored, which was Bailey Sirenen and Alex Johnston. Alex Johnston played really well, and I think he was just most conservative player of the match anyway. And I just think for him, just really motivates really well. And I just think with this player, Alex Johnston, he's just really on foot, really fit, and he just, when he gets the ball, he's really fast and real skillful. But I just think well done for him anyway. But my player of the round, as I just mentioned, Alex Johnston. The player of the game for Alex Johnston, he was absolutely really a great player. I just think he obviously scored a try that really helps the Raiders get on top of their form. But I know for a fact that the Rabbitohs didn't really concede any points, but they obviously conceded 2 points, which I think it was really hard to obviously beat the Panthers anyway. But I just think that game was absolutely really difficult to say whether or not if the Panthers were going to win or the Rabbitohs were going to win anyway. But I just think the Panthers got the job done up against the Rabbitohs anyway. The next game of this match, we see the Storm going up against the Warriors. This game was really on top, bloody beautiful of this game. I really do think that the Melbourne Storm are a real good team. They're the second hardest team to beat, and really, they're just playing on top of their form. And every time they verse like the Titans, the Broncos, the Cowboys, they always win that game. Like, especially the Titans, like they just really get their form and just don't miss anything. But I obviously went for the Storm by 8 points, which was 50 points to 6. Which was 50 points to 6 that scoreline, and that game was really fired up match for the Melbourne Storm. Which for me, that the Warriors didn't really play as hard as they were going to play hard, because sometimes they do win a match, but then going up against the Melbourne Storm, they really had that consecutive win, but they just real need to have good quality players that just think that we are going to win, we are going to be strong, we are going to fight for our team. And they obviously haven't, because that scoreline was absolutely smash worthy, and they obviously dominated the Warriors anyway. But for the Melbourne Storm, I really do think they are a great team, but sometimes they do clash and struggle a little bit, but then they come back and they obviously win for their team anyway. But let's have a look at their Storm tries anyway. For the players that have scored was Paul Momorowski scored double, 2 tries. Suliasi Vunivalu scored 3 tries, a triple, absolutely great player. Ryan Pappenhausen scored a double, which means 2 tries anyway. Brandon Smith and Josh Adokar. Well done for these players anyway. But only the one that tried to actually conservative for the Warriors was Patrick Herbert from number 4 on the wing. He played really well, but not as well as the other players too. But for my player of the game was this guy, the new guy that just came out of West Tigers. I just think that this player just stand out and just need to play another game like up against like another team. And my player of that game, of that team, was basically Paul Momorowski. He was an absolutely great player that just scored like 2 tries and was just really working hard to just get that motivated skill right. But for him, I really do think that he's going to have a great career to the Melbourne Storm. He was playing for the West Tigers, but I just think when he went to the Melbourne Storm, he was obviously needed money to get that contract and to obviously for his family and something like that anyway. But for that game, it was a real fired up match, and I just think that that game was really hard for the Warriors that just didn't really conceded any points, but only conceded 1, which Patrick Herbert only scored that 1 try to seal that 1 try of that game anyway. The next game of that match, we see the Roosters going up against the Dragons. Now that game was real high intensifying match. Usually they play like Anzac Day clash, but this game wasn't an Anzac Day clash. It was a normal clash that absolutely just real normal game of an average game of football. But I think that that game was real consistent. Roosters were basically gonna win, but in that first half, the Roosters weren't really paying attention to focus on the ball that much. But for the Dragons, though, they were paying attention because they were fired up in that game, and I just think they were gonna win. But the Roosters in the second half just came out on top and obviously just make that win 26 points to 12. And I did pick the Roosters by 12 points anyway. But let's have a look at the Roosters' tries anyway. So what we've got here is Brett Morris scored 3 tries. Absolutely great play anyway for the wing. Joe Hargreaves and Luke Keary. Let's have a look at the Dragons' tries. So 2 of the players obviously scored, which was Michele Ravalawa and Zach Lomax. He was an absolutely great player anyway. But my player of the game for this one, as I just mentioned before, he has scored 3 tries. Absolutely fantastic player. Brett Morris from the Sydney Roosters, number 5. Absolutely great player. I just think he's going to have a wonderful career in the Sydney Roosters. And I really do think that that game was a real average game, but not high intensifying match. But what I can say for the Roosters, they are a real hard premiership winning favourite team. That I just think they are going to basically make that top 4 of the ladder. And I really do think that that game was absolutely real high intensifying match, but it wasn't really high intensifying. It was just average game that just real conceded for the Roosters to make that win. Up against the Dragons anyway, it was a 26 points to 12 scoreline anyway. The next game of that match, we see the Cowboys versus the Knights. Now, this game was really hard to think that the Knights, I thought the Knights were going to win that game. But without Bradman Best for number 4 for Newcastle Knights, I really don't think that the Knights weren't going to win that game because Bradman Best is a usual great player that just really stands out on top and make the Newcastle Knights obviously win a match. But Newcastle Knights were playing a really good match. But I think in the second half they were playing a real good game of football. But they weren't playing really good enough to obviously make a win up against the Cowboys. But for the Cowboys though, what I can say about that game was a really high intensifying match, and I just think that game was really good of a win for the Cowboys, and just credit for the Cowboys anyway. But without Valentine Holmes, the Cowboys really made a really good effort to obviously win that match. But it was a 32 points to 20 scoreline, and I thought that the Newcastle Knights were going to come back and obviously win a game, but they didn't, and they scored 3 tries and made a penalty goal, I'd say, because obviously you can't make another try to make 4 tries, make it 20 points anyway. But for the Cowboys tries, let's have a look at that. We have Justin O'Neill, Hamiso, Tabuai Fidel, Jake Clifford, Kyle Felt, and Cohen Hess. But for the Newcastle Knights, let's have a look at the tries anyway. We have Tex Hoy, Heimel Hunt, Kurt Mann, and Jamet Shibasaki. I really do think that Tex Hoy is a real standout player. Sometimes he doesn't play good, sometimes he plays good, but not really that good. But it was a stand-up match for him. But Hamiso Tubuai Fidel played a really good game of football. It was a couple of the games that he obviously played for since Valentine Holmes was out due to injury. But Justin O'Neill is a bit quiet sometimes. He doesn't really get the ball, but sometimes he does score a couple of tries or 1 try or so. But my player of the game from the North Queensland Cowboys on the wing, number 2, Cole Felt. This player really stood out. He is just absolutely a great player. Every time someone, like in a halfback, say for instance, you got Jake Clifford, when he kicks the ball, obviously Cole Felt tries to catch it up in the air and obviously score a try, and which he obviously did, and well done to him anyway. But I just think that game was obviously a real good match. It was a 32 points to 20 scoreline, and I tipped the Knights by 4 points, and they obviously lost that match anyway. The next game of this match, we see the Broncos going up against the Titans. Now that game was real interesting because Titans aren't really winning a lot of games. But then they came out on top and they just scored 5 tries to make it 30 points to 12 scoreline. Absolutely well done to the Titans. But they're still not a top 8 contest. They're still not a top 8 team that just doesn't really make a move for the competition. But I did go for the Broncos by 6 points. They obviously lost. And real interesting to see Titans getting a win, because sometimes they don't really get a win. But if you go up against Broncos, Dragons, and then Sharks, they do sometimes obviously get a loss. But then yeah, what a great match for this game. The Titans stood out really well and they played a wonderful game of football. But let's have a look at the Broncos tries. So we have Ben Teo and Herbie Farnworth. Herbie Farnworth is a real good player, but sometimes he just doesn't get a real good effort for the Broncos anyway. But let's have a look at the Titans tries. So we have Ash Taylor, Anthony Don scored 2 tries, which means double. Sam Lasone and Philip Sammy. Philip Sammy has gone real quiet. I just didn't think he had a great match for that game. But for my player of the game, number 2 or number 5 for that match on the wing was Anthony Don. He played a real good match. I just think he really conceded really well and he just stands out on top, but sometimes he doesn't really play a good game of football. But for this match up against the Broncos, he played a wonderful game of football, and I just think well done for you, and credit to this guy for making 2 tries for a double and plus making a real good game to concede a very good scoreline anyway. The next game of that match, we see the Eels going up against the Raiders. Now, that game was real high intensifying match. The Raiders were playing a real good game of football, but not good enough to see things working out pretty terrible. But that game, though, it was just hard to say that the Eels are a really good team, but they just keep winning and winning and winning. I didn't think that they were going to beat the Raiders, but then they just overtaken the Raiders, and I just think they're just going to be a real good top 5 team in the competition. But it was a 25-24 scoreline, and I didn't think that the Eels were going to win, but they did, which means Clint Gutherson obviously kicked the field goal to make that win of that game, 25-24. And I tipped the Eels by 10 points, and they obviously won by a field goal, 25-24. I know I keep saying it again because I'm just making sure you guys know. But let's have a look at the Eels tries anyway. So we have Ryan Madison, Ray Stone, Michael Jennings, and Mike Osivo. All those players there. Ryan Madison had a great match. So did Ray Stone. Michael Jennings is just old, and he plays a lot of matches for the Eels. And Mike Osivo, he's a great player, but sometimes he does struggle a little bit. But it depends what team you go up against anyway. But let's have a look at the Raiders tries. So we have Josh Papali, Elliot Whitehead, and Chance Nickel-Clockstead, because he obviously scored 2 tries, which made it a double. And I think that match was obviously a real high intensifying match, but it was just real hard to say that if the Raiders were going to win or the Eels were going to win. But unfortunately though, Raiders didn't win that game, but then the Eels took home with the win by only 1 point. But my player of the game for that match was going to... This player really stood out for me, was basically Ryan Madison, and this player was just absolutely real consecutive player, and I just think he's going to have a wonderful career in the Eels. Well done to you anyway, and I just think that game was real basically hard to say that if they were going to win or if they weren't. But that game was real hard and real tight of a match anyway. The next game of that match, we see the Seagulls going up against the Sharks. Now, that game was real surprising, interesting game. I thought the Manly Seagulls were going to get a win for this game. But the Sharks just came out on top, weren't going to think about losing, and then they just came out firing, which I think that game was real high intensifying game. But I did go for the Seagulls by 2 points, and they obviously lost. What I think about that match is just this player came out on top, and just every time he plays a game, he just scores every single try that he scores. And it's just a top finisher for a player that really stands out for the club. But let's have a look at the Seagulls tries anyway. We have George Tafua, Adam Fanua Blake scored 2 tries, which means a double. And Tafina Funa. Tafina Funa is a real stand-up player. He is a development player that just came to the Manly Seagulls anyway. But let's have a look at the Sharks tries. So we have Braden Hamanueli, Sione Katoa. This guy is a real standout freak that scored 2 tries. Jesse Ramian, Josh Dugan, Bryson Goodwin, and Blake Brayley. Blake Brayley had a real good match. But who I think of the player of the game for that match, obviously, stand out for me, and I just think he is a wonderful player that just stands out for the Cronulla Sharks, was Sione Katoa. This player just absolutely gets a try after try after try. He is a top try-scoring finisher that I think that he's going to have a wonderful career for the Sharks anyway. But it was a 40 points to 22 scoreline, and I did go for the Seagulls by 2 points, but then they obviously lost. And well done to the Sharks for making a real good effort to obviously win that game of football up against the Seagulls, which they were falling apart because without Tom Travojevic, Brad Parker, Moses Sully, Dylan Walker, they just were real struggling for that game. And I just think I do feel so sorry for the Manly Seagulls that are struggling a little bit. But Daly Cherry Evans obviously played a really good game of football. But anyway, well done to the Cronulla Sharks for making a real good win up against the Manly Seagulls anyway. The next game of this match, which is the last match, we see the Bulldogs versus the West Tigers. That game was a real high intensifying match. The West Tigers, I knew for a fact in my mind that obviously the West Tigers were going to win, and they obviously did. 34 points to 6 that scoreline was, and I did tip the West Tigers by 14 points, and they obviously win that match. That game was really poor for the Bulldogs, since they are sitting on a 16th ladder, which means the wooden spooners. But the only one try they obviously conceded for that match was Remus Smith for the winger. He's a real good player. But then you obviously got other players too that just need to have some time and train a lot harder, so that means they can obviously play a real good game of football. But let's have a look at the West Tigers tries. So we have Harry Grant, Tommy Talau scored a double, Joseph Leilua, David Nofaluma and Adam Dewey. David Norfoluma and Tommy Talau obviously scored 2 tries, which means a double. Well done to David Norfoluma anyway, and I just think he was having a really good match for that game. But Tommy Talau is a new basic player that just comes into West Tigers. If, say for instance, like if you got Corey Thompson, since he left, he obviously went to the Titans. He's obviously now coming into that wing position and just fulfilling that position to make it a real good thing for that position. But David Norfoluma is a real good player that obviously scored 2 tries that obviously made an intercept. But Adam Dewey is just... sometimes he's a great player, but sometimes he just doesn't get that feeling that he wants to play a real good match. But for my player of the game, went to this number 9, the new player that just is a developing player for that match, is Harry Grant, number 9 from the West Tigers. He was playing a brilliant match. I think he just needs to improve a little bit to make him a wonderful player for that career for the West Tigers. I just think he's going to have a wonderful career though, and I think he will. But well done to the West Tigers for obviously making a win up against the Bulldogs anyway. But I did tip the West Tigers by 14 points, and they obviously won. And it was a 34 points to 6 scoreline anyway. Thanks guys for watching my video, guys. Stay tuned for more. I will be doing a couple of videos coming to you guys soon. Also, I'll be doing more videos coming to you guys soon, so stay tuned for more. Plus, leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel and for this video. And I'll see you guys in my next video. Till then, take care guys, stay safe, and have a good one. Plus, let's get up to 200 subscribers. We're sitting on 163 anyway. I'm nearly there to my goal. After 200, we're going to go up to 250 anyway. But let's see, after when we reach 200, we're going to reach up to 250, 300, 350, 400 anyway. So that's the thing what we're going to do anyway. So that means, let's get up to 200 subscribers. We're sitting on 163 anyway. So, take care guys, and have a good one.